Hi, I'm Chito Sanchez, and welcome to Stick Library. I am the main contributor for all the Latin percussion for Stick Library, and today's lesson is going to be the very basic lesson. We're going to get you hopefully started on what are the absolute basics of conga playing. And we're going to start with the main and most basic of all, the actual drum. Usually there are, in a set, there can be 2, there can be 3, there can be 4, there can be 5, depends on how much of a virtuoso you are at conga playing. I, as you can tell, have 2. That's as far as I go. No, just kidding. There were days when I played 5, but today's not that day. All right, so anyway, they're not all called congas. Congas is a kind of a group name for these drums, but they do have separate names. The main drum, the middle drum, most companies make 3 sizes. And you would have your quinto, your conga, and your tumba, which is short for tumbadora, which is this drum, the big drum. So the big drum is the tumba, your medium drum is the conga, and then your smallest drum is the quinto, which is not here today. So hopefully next time we'll have that one. And the reason why there's 3 main sizes in a group of congas is when you get together with other conga players and you sit down and you play, there's 3 parts, 3 main conga parts. You have your salidor, your tres golpe, and then you have your quinto, and your quinto is your solo drum. We're going to get into all these rhythms later, so don't worry about it. I'll teach you all that stuff in a while. But I'm just trying to get you a little basic knowledge here. So now that you know what the congas are used for and what their main roles are, let's talk about these drums. These are Pearl. I endorse Pearl Instruments percussion drums. They're great drums, fantastic. This is a totally synthetic drum. It's a fiberglass shell. It's a synthetic head made by Remo, which I endorse as well. And these are great heads. Very live drums. Although these drums are a little shorter in height, they're punchy. They got a great bottom end, and they really cut through when you need them. So this is what I play. This is obviously not a traditional drum. A traditional drum would be a wood shell. Extremely traditional drum would be a wood shell made out of wine barrels, French wine barrels, brought over to Cuba that they took and made drums out of. They shrank them down and made drums out of them, and then took a mule skin and stretched over the top, tacked it down, and that was your original conga. The conga is a Cuban instrument. It's not an African instrument. It's a Cuban instrument. It was born in Cuba. It was made in Cuba, and that's why the most amazing conga players come from that island of Cuba. So there you go. There are some great wooden drums. I know Pearl makes a whole line of traditional folkloric drums which are wood and have real calf skin heads on them, which sound great as well. But for everyday application, especially if you're touring and playing, and I live in Las Vegas right now, so we get some extreme temperatures here. It gets really hot in the summer, really cold in the winter. You need a synthetic drum, a synthetic head that can deal with those extreme weather conditions. So that's why it's good to have a synthetic head and synthetic drum for your everyday playing. All right, so that said, let's get into some conga sounds. Okay, so now, you got your drums at home, you went down to your local store, music store, and bought yourself some congas. Now, there's maintenance involved, obviously, in any instrument. Just because you bought the drums, it's a synthetic drum and a synthetic head, doesn't mean you don't have to take care of it. Yes, there's less maintenance involved in a synthetic drum than there would be in a natural wood drum, but nevertheless there is some maintenance. When you're tuning your drum, they don't come tuned from the factory, by the way. So you got to tune them up. Now, depending on what kind of music you're going to be playing with your congas, if you're playing rock, if you're playing pop, if you're playing Latin in a traditional setting, or if you're just going to be banging around at the house, I always suggest to start with a nice tuning, a fairly close tuning. I tune these G and C, which I think is a nice interval, which gives you, nice range there, especially with your slaps. So it's pretty cool. This is probably what I would use this tuning for a Latin or a traditional gig. If I'm doing like a Latin salsa gig, or if I'm doing a Latin jazz gig. If I was doing a pop gig or a rock gig, I would definitely crank this conga up a little higher, or have 3 drums and have the quinto just tuned a little higher than this drum right here, and keep this one the same. Okay, so when you have you get your drums home, you got to be careful. So, most of these drums are made in Thailand, so they come shipped over in, across the ocean there. And sometimes they rust out, even though they put them in plastic and all that. You open the box, and some of these lugs can be rusty. So, just check them out, lube them up, get some oil. Most of them come with some type of lubricant that you can just throw on there really quick, and then just and they come with a tuning wrench, which is usually 1/2-inch wrench. Just a standard 1/2-inch wrench, an open-end 1/2-inch wrench is what they come with. I like to use a ratchet wrench, and I got used to using the ratchet wrench before the synthetic head was developed. I'm dating myself, but it's okay. It's back in the 80s and the early 90s, before the synthetic head was developed, everyone used calfskins. And let me tell you, there's nothing worse than being on tour down in Mississippi somewhere in the middle of summer, and you do your sound check and you tune your drums and they sound great, and when you get out there for your show 3 hours later, it's like playing a plastic garbage can. There's absolutely no response. So you need something to tune up really quick, and here's where the ratchet wrench comes in. Please hold. Right here. So I went down to my local hardware store, picked up a really good ratchet wrench with a long 1/2-inch socket, and I keep this in my gig bag. It's always with me. I can tune it up really quick, and it makes life a lot easier. So, and that's the reason why I like the ratchet wrench. When these heads were developed, it was a godsend. I mean, because I remember the first time I did a gig down south in the summer with the synthetic head, and I did the sound check, and I went back to do the gig, and it was exactly the same intonation. Everything, it didn't move. It was wonderful. It was really great. So I was really happy, and I'm sure every other percussionist in the world probably was just as happy. But as far as maintenance, you want to clean them off. Don't let your heads get filthy dirty. Remember, you are touching the drum. Your hands are touching these drums. When other people play your drums as well, if you're like in a drum circle or something, somebody sits in, these people have germs on their hands. They have, I don't know where, you don't know where their hands have been. I don't know where their hands have been. So, take care of your heads. Wipe them down. You don't want to use anything too aggressive, like any cleaners. But just something with a damp towel, just go and try to get some of the grit off of it, because if you get a cut from playing too much or too hard, if the air is too dry, your skin can crack, you can get a cut, and you can get whatever's on that drum head is now inside your hand, and that you can get an infection, and you can get all kinds of things, and that's what you don't want. Believe me, it happened to me. I'm letting you know. So what I do now is I take really good care of my hands. I have absolutely no issues. I wash my hands after every gig, and with soap and water. And these drum heads are about, I would say, 1.5 years old, and they look like they're brand new. I don't know if you can see that on the camera. Is that good right there? Is that cool? Right there. They're totally clean. There's some markings there, but it's all right. And I've done some heavy playing on these drums. So, but just take care of them. I've seen some conga players show up with these drums, especially like when they were using all the real calf heads, and there was like a mound of just built up black dirt, which was just disgusting. It not only is like totally just disgusting, but it affects your sound, and I think it's a little bit of a health hazard as well. So anyway, that's that. As far as these shells are concerned, they're synthetic. You don't do anything to them. You wipe them down. If they're dusty, that means you haven't been practicing. Just wipe them off or whatever. If they get dirty or something, if you're playing with shorts on, they get a little sweaty, whatever. If you're playing sitting down, that's all you got to do with that. Because you're using synthetic heads, you don't have to tune them as much. You don't have to detune and tune. like you would a normal head, a real head, a calfskin head. So the drum stays in tune basically. It'll go down a little bit, it'll go up a little bit depending on somewhat, but it's very minimal. And so just a little adjustment of tuning is cool. So which means you don't have to constantly be, lubing up your tuning lugs and things like that. So they're pretty carefree. They're pretty easy to take care of, but still there are a few things you got to take care of. What I do is when I change my heads, these synthetic heads will last if you're playing them, 2, 3 times, 4 times a week. I think they'll last a good year and a half or so. And what I do is when I change out the heads, when I remove this head, you obviously have an open shell. I go around inside and just tighten up all of anything that can be tightened up. If it's a nut, if it's a screw, whatever, I just go and hand tighten it, with a screwdriver or a wrench or something, not too tight, just to make sure everything, so you don't have any rattling, because there's a lot of banging going on here. Even when you clamp on a microphone, if you're playing hard, sometimes the SM57s, the capsule will start rattling. So there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of banging going on, so you want to make sure everything inside of your drum is nice and tight. And if the synthetic drum, this fiberglass drum, obviously was the first one that was ever made was Martin Cohen from LP, and it used to be two pieces, and they would kind of join them together. They've gotten the technology so good that they just have one seamless piece now, which is great. And they're not that heavy, and they sound really good. One of the pluses of having a fiberglass drum as opposed to a wood drum is that when you are in extreme weather, like here in Vegas, or even anywhere, even it could be New York or it could be LA, but when it gets cold and hot, your wood can crack. So you have to really take care of it. You can't, these drums, I throw them in a bag and then throw them in the back of my car and go to a gig. The wood drums, when I had my wood drums, I would, wrap them up carefully, put them inside the car very carefully. You didn't want anything to hit it. You wanted to make sure that the head was totally protected at all times, because even if you got like a scratch on your calfskin, that can open up and just rip right on a gig. So I would put like an extra towel or something over the drum head on a calfskin, and then wrap that with a bungee cord, and then put that inside the case. Make sure when I finish the gig, detune the skin so that it would release the pressure from the wood. The skin is stronger than the wood. If you keep cranking down that skin, if it's a good skin, that skin won't rip. And what will happen is that your lugs will actually start pulling the wood away from the other pieces of wood. So that's one of the things you gotta be really careful with when you have wood drums as opposed to fiberglass drums. I love the sound of wood drums. I have wood drums at home. It's what I use a lot for recording. They want that nice warm sound. Most producers, they think sometimes that these drums are a little bit too live, too much, because they're made for live playing. So it's hard to control the sound. So I have a set of wood drums as well that I use with calfskins, and they sound amazing. And same thing with bongos. I have a pair of wood bongos with real calfskins, and they sound great. And the fiberglass drums with the synthetic head also sound great. They totally different animals, but they both sound just as equally as great. So so the plus and the minus between a synthetic drum and a natural drum, I think the synthetic drum is just so much more easier to deal with day to day, as opposed to a natural drum, which just you have to take a little bit more time, a little more effort, and a little bit more care into what you're doing.